On today's episode, we'll examine how Teslas only benefit Elon Musk, get a history lesson on how America is a democracy built on the principle of majority rule, and we'll take a deep dive into why 80 million Americans deserve the stick. This is Cringe Post. Hello, friends, and welcome to the Cringe Post podcast. My name's Britt.
And I'm Donald.
And we take on the online takes that you see in your feed that might make you cringe, or maybe they don't make a lot of sense to you, but you can't just put your finger on why it's wrong. And so we'd like to go through those, but before we do that, we like to poke some fun at ourselves. And today we're going to poke some fun at my co-host here, Donald Kimball. And in 2010, September 15th, he writes, "The law is like retainers," as in the retainer you wear on your teeth after you get braces. "You may not want to wear them, but they keep you in line. If you don't wear them, or if you break them, you become crooked." How clever.
Very witty. Would you believe at the time I was wearing retainers? Would that shock you to find out that the the metaphor there came from a personal bit of inspiration? I'm sure that's shocking to many.
It's so funny that like people like I used to view this too, because I was kind of a law and order Republican, and I, like we've talked about before the show, like I appreciate the rules, right? Like I appreciate rules that actually aid in human flourishing. But if you look up like all the laws that are on the books, right? Like no one is able to keep any of them because most of them make no sense. Like I was thinking of. Right. Like in certain states, like you're not supposed to shower on Tuesdays because back, in the 1900s, all the farmers were supposed to use water on Tuesdays for irrigation. And if you took a bath or anything, like they wouldn't have enough water. That law is still on the books, believe it or not. It is technically still illegal to do that. And then you have all the way up to like laws that are actually do impact our everyday lives. But just because it's a law doesn't mean it's moral.
No, of course not. Yeah. And I just, at the time, I hadn't really wrapped my head around the idea of that, the idea that rules in and of themselves are more of what I'm looking for, but rules are just as easily manipulated if they're within a legal context than not. And if you'd asked me that sort of abstractly, I'm sure I would have said, well, sure, laws can be bad, but like as a whole, I didn't really understand sort of that, like maybe the institution from the outset that is setting the laws isn't necessarily doing so in the right way. So, and what's funny about it too is kind of the implication of, if you break them, you become crooked. The implication is that like, if you step out of line from the law, you're on the path to being a bad person and all that sort of thing. But if you look at it from another perspective, which I wasn't at the time for sure, but you could also look at it in the sense like if you break the laws, you become crooked, but maybe not of your own volition, right? Like when you have the recidivism rates of the criminal justice system, where people break the law and then they end up going to prison and then they go back there because it puts them in such a terrible state of affairs because it's such a horrible place. Then maybe you realize, wait, maybe they became crooked because of the government system that set them up and put them into a horrible situation in the first place, aka prison, aka loss, off the street, out of experience, unable to get a job, in a place where there's physical violence, those kinds of things. So the law itself is maybe to blame for them becoming crooked, even if they break it, in that sense.
Did you see the article about the guy that tried to buy the Mountain Dew at the gas station?
Yes,
yeah, for those of you that don't know about that, there's a gas station was running a promo like, hey, you can buy 2 Mountain Dews for $3 or for the price of one, basically. And the Mountain Dew was listed, I think it was like $1.50. And so the guy plopped down, $3 or whatever, or maybe it's $2. It was
so
go for it.
So he just tried to buy one. The special was buy 2 for $3. So he just tried to buy one and put down $1.50. But the special was you had to buy 2. So the rate was actually something like $1.77 for a single Mountain Dew rather than $1.50 like he assumed.
Yep, and so he plopped down $1.50 when it was really $1.77, and he left the store. And the employees of the gas station called the police. They used the surveillance footage, went to his house over 22 cents or whatever it was, and they arrested him. And because he had some prior theft stuff on his record.
Mm-hmm. He had two.
He had 2. So this was his third strike, you're out, right? And so the judge, regardless of whatever happened, he's got mandatory minimums for his sentencing, over a couple of cents, literally a quarter, maybe.
Yeah, and what's crazy is I believe the two prior convictions that he had were similarly small petty thefts. So again, maybe not like the most. I'm not saying that every single time he was on record was a complete accident necessarily, but they weren't. It wasn't like he'd gotten away with grand theft auto or anything like that. They were petty thefts before, and then because of this mistake of 22 cents, the mandatory minimums, because I believe this happened in Pennsylvania, which is a three strike law. The mandatory minimums, if he's found, and I don't know when that trial happens, but if he's found guilty, he gets something like 10 or 15 years minimum in prison, which is insane.
Yeah, there's no way you can say that the law is just in that sense.
No. Well, and it's not just, and to imagine that he's going to have a transition out of there that's going to be at all healthy back into society, in 10, 15 years, assuming he has to go away, which let's pray he doesn't. But if he does, I mean, like at best, he becomes broken in society, and at worst, he becomes a menace to society.
Yep, absolutely. So. All right, moving on from that to our first cringe of the day. We've got, and this looks like it's like a page. So I'm going to read their name. The page is titled "Defend Second Amendment," and they post a picture of a Model S Tesla, and they say, "You've got to be effing insane to want one of these clown cars!" Exclamation point times 3. The only one that benefits is Elon and no one else. Got to protect our manufacturing, I guess.
Well, I it's for a Model S with its, different stats listed there. And someone's like, there has to be someone that wants to buy this for me, is sort of the original quote tweet that he's doing. And he's like, you got to be effing insane. And it's like, what? Just on the basis of guilty pleasures, like defend the Second Amendment, something tells me this person probably has an extensive gun collection, and you can easily flip the script on him, be like, you have to be effing insane to want more than like 5 guns or something like that. It's like I respect the right of anyone to get into a hobby and buy whatever they want, just first of all. So like to think someone has to be effing insane to want one to Tesla is like, it's just like so small-minded in my opinion. But obviously, it just benefits Elon and no one else. That's so silly and so stupid. It's wrong on so many levels. Obviously, it's wrong in the sense that you get something that you see as beneficial more, and it brings value to you and to your life, because value is subjective, right? And then it also brings value to the economy. It brings value to manufacturing. It brings value to infrastructure in terms of like helping support new technologies and emerging technologies in that field. There's so many people it benefits. So I don't know, it's weird to me to take the stance that it benefits Elon and no one else. That just seems willfully ignorant.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting how both sides of the political spectrum have like this really protectionist, like hate the wealthy vibe to them. It was funny because I was talking to someone that was in the trades, very, very, very blue collar and very, very conservative, and similar perspective, right? Just hates Tesla and Elon, thinks he's evil and everything. And, there is something to be said, right? Like Elon uses tax credits to like make his product, actually work, in the market and everything. And then he also has like, lobbied for various different, policies down in South America so that he can get the different types of resources for his cars. But outside of that, it's like, man, like people are employed, people are making things, people are buying those things because they get enjoyment from it. I mean, at the very least, even if on the Tesla side of the equation, Elon was the only person who benefited, it's still not true that no one else does, because whoever bought the car benefited, right?
Yeah.
And that's just so ironic. You look at people like Tucker Carlson or any of those guys that get really, really protectionist. Like, we need to bring these types of manufacturing jobs back, and I hate these big companies that ship these jobs overseas. It's like, dude, like, that's just like the benefit of us shipping jobs overseas in some ways is that you get products for cheaper, right? Like, you could bring them back here. You can't have it both ways. Like, products are going to be really expensive if they're brought back here. Maybe they would go down, based on economies of scale and efficiency, but that's in the short term, that's what would happen. So you can't you can't have Walmart prices for Nordstrom like goods, right? That's just not how it works.
Yeah, and something that's interesting to me is that I think a lot of those conservatives that are protectionist on that, or at least are skeptical of sort of the like benefit of the doubt. They're skeptical because of the tax subsidies or something like that. It's like, well, yeah, but why would you get mad at Elon? Why would you get mad at people buying a product from Elon? Why would you not get mad at the subsidy? Because the subsidy is going to exist whether Elon is making a Tesla or not. The difference between Tesla using that and some other companies, that the other companies make terrible products that always fail, and Elon's the only one, well, not the only one, but one of the most notable and one of the few who's made a product with these subsidies that works, that is desirable, and that is at least to some degree self-sustaining.
Yeah.
Maybe, and so, profitable with subsidy, which the other ones haven't even. I mean, Solyndra comes to mind, right? That's kind of the big example that comes to mind with failed government subsidies in renewable energy. But so it's like, let's take Elon and Tesla out of the equation. All you've done, right? Is you've swapped out one successful line of cars that are trendy and functional and cool for people, creating something desirable, for another company that is either going to implode and fail or create something that nobody wants, or both. So why would you attack this one symptom of a problem if that's what you want to call Tesla? Because I'm assuming that's kind of what your main complaint is, rather than attacking the actual system itself that's creating the scenario you don't like. That to me is puzzling.
Yep. Yeah, you're kind of right. Like this is the once in a blue moon subsidized company that has produced a product that people actually want and benefit from using, right? Like that's very, very rare. So why would you hate on that company of all companies? Like hate on the actual infrastructure that wastes it on all these other products and companies that don't actually give us any benefit.
Yep, absolutely.
All right, moving on to our next one. We've got someone on Twitter, and they write, "Our democracy was founded on the principle of majority rule. Under the Constitution, a bill that earns majority support in the House and Senate, as well as the signature of the president, is supposed to become a law. Kill the filibuster." There's so much wrong with this. It was hard for me to read it without laughing. Like,
when I think about a bicameral legislature and a three-headed government, and one of those having the power to pass law, and one of them having the power to review and make sure it's constitutional, and one of them having the power to outright reject a law in its entirety, the first thing that comes to my mind is majority rule. I mean, it's funny because he kind of spells out, it's like under the Constitution, a bill that earns the majority of House and Senate and the signature of the president, then it becomes law.
It's like that SpongeBob meme when I can't remember the villain, but like for the Aquaman and that is like trying to spill out it for Patrick. And he's like, so you have a house and you have, a judicial branch and you have the executive branch. So we're not a democracy. No, we're democracy. It's just like, oh my gosh.
Right. Well, and I mean, obviously it was not founded on the principle of majority rule.
No.
I mean, that's just obviously not true historically speaking.
I'm pretty sure England had like 4 times as many people that wanted us to stay with them. So.
Yeah, right. and specifically within the minutia of this, of course, the filibuster is a procedure that happens within the Senate, that Senate chamber specifically. And of all of those branches, the Senate was the very specific branch designated to cool the passions of a fiery populist public. The Senate was literally created by the founders who were scared of democracy. Like, our founders were somewhat elitist, and I will defend to an extent, rightly so, right? Like, I'm an elitist when it comes to doctors, right? I don't take a popular vote on what I want my remedy to be. I talk to an expert, someone who's an elite in that field, and who gauges my situation. And so they were elitist in the sense that they didn't want, the people just running things in sort of a populist whim, even though they just came out of that, right? They were fresh out of doing that themselves because they recognized the problem with a hierarchy, monarchy, top-down tyranny. So it's not like they're, these elitist snobs who don't care about people, but they also recognize that there's a danger to populism, to the fiery heated passions, and so they created the House to get the popular sentiment, and the Senate to have cooler heads reflect. That's why originally senators were elected by state legislative bodies, not directly by the citizens. They had longer terms, and there was only going to be 2 equal representation for the states. The whole idea was to get rid of the idea of majority rule and majority tyranny. That's why you don't have them based on population. It's why they weren't originally voted on in state or in just, citizen votes or whatever. Everything about the Senate is not about majority rule. That's how it is designed.
I love the and we'll have to do one of these at some point, but the midwit memes and posts about, so, California's got, 20 million people and Wyoming's got 700,000, but they both have 2 senators each. How does that make sense? You're like, like, okay, dude. Like, like, it's the same thing with like when they want to do away with electoral college or anything like that. It's like you must have been asleep or skipped history class. I mean, I guess it's the public education system, so can't really blame them for wanting to get out of there, but.
Well, they're probably being told that every idea that came out of the founders was racist. So if you support a well thought out division of power, it's because you want to make sure to keep yourself in the oppressing position as a white person or as a man or whatever, division they want to ascribe to you. And so a division of powers is so that you can stay on top and keep people under. And just in case you're unfamiliar, the filibuster is a procedure in the Senate that allows any member of the Senate to object to a bill being passed and to speak and to not yield his time, effectively stalling out and or sometimes killing a bill from passing. Sometimes if a bill has too much of a majority in the Senate, filibuster can be overruled. But unless a bill has, and I think a filibuster can be voted out. I want to say, is it by the 2/3 majority? Anyway, point is, I'm kind of bad on the specifics. I haven't reviewed it recently, but the point is it's a tactic to stall out a bad bill by, a single senator can filibuster. Rand Paul filibustered renewal on the certain surveillance acts. Ted Cruz has filibustered on Obamacare, etc. So it's a tactic that is used in order to prevent the passage of a bad bill that might have majority support. And that's what they're talking about here. In case you're not familiar.
He stood and debated for 12 hours straight.
Yes. And by that time that was probably the day that like solidified me calling myself libertarian versus Republican. I remember I was at our college and I was working my student worker job, and I was covering for someone else because that student worker was out, and so my department transferred me. So I was actually running reception in one of the buildings, and like no one was there, and so I had my computer up with Rand Paul filibustering, and I remember getting texts from people saying, "Hey, your guy's on it, like your guy's going," and I'm like, "Yes, let's go."
That's
awesome. It was a good day.
Very important. And what's always funny to me is, whatever party is in power always wants to get rid of the filibuster. Whatever party is out of power always wants to keep it. And then the second they flip and they flop, they'll, switch positions, and, they're always making their points. So
absolutely.
Only about power.
Yeah, that was super prominent in the Trump years. I mean, that was the really defining feature of sort of a principled conservative versus a populist conservative. And I say principled conservative somewhat loosely, but there are conservatives who hold to principles. I don't think they're grounded in much, unfortunately. But there's a difference. And the principled conservatives wanted to keep the filibuster, and the populist ones did not, because they thought it was thwarting Trump's agenda. And now, of course, the populists keep the filibuster. So it's yeah.
All right, moving on to our next one. We've got a blue check mark, Kimberly Johnson. I had to look her up. She's an author for children's books. And she tweeted out, "Anti-vaxxers need to be left behind. Don't want to take one for the team? Then you can't be part of the team. Can't work, can't fly, can't eat at restaurants, no concerts, no bars, no dice. People who want to advance society don't have to cater to those who drag us down."
Writing children's literature for so long, I guess, gives you a childish perspective on life. It gives you childish takes. Like, good grief. I just want anyone like
I don't
watching
want to be on a
this
team
or-
with her. So okay.
Anyone watching or listening to this podcast, like rewind to that post, re-listen to it, but think about it from the perspective of, now imagine talking about this and realize that Black vaccination rates and minority vaccination rates are the lowest, and they are the most hesitant and the most skeptical. Okay, now reread that and tell me that does not read like the most racist thing ever. I mean, people who don't want to advance society don't have to cater to those who drag us down, or people who want to advance society don't have to cater to those who drag us down. Like that's kind of sketchy, man. For a lot of people who are skeptical, and I would say correctly so, skeptical of colonialism, they're often skeptical for the reasons of moral equivalency and like we can't disrupt primitive cultures and those kinds of things. Like we can't impose our values on them. But if it comes to these values, well, we can impose these values because these are just, white supremacist, redneck, Christian, whatever you want, scapegoat, straw man, fill in the blank, not whatever protected group actually doesn't want the vaccine.
Yeah. And the thing is, like, I guess if I gave her the most charitable take of this tweet, like, I'd be like, you're right. Like, I don't want to be on your team. You don't want to be on my team. So let's just go our separate ways and call it good. But no, what she's talking about specifically, with the whole Biden mandate and everything is like, no, as America, you can't be on Team America, and
right.
that's obviously that isn't okay. I also dislike how they lump in, like, they use the term anti-vaxxer, right? Like, when people ask me, like, hey, like, are you for or against vaccines? I'm like, or they ask me, are you vaccinated? I'm like, yeah, I've had my measles vaccine, I've had my polio vaccine, I get my tetanus shots. And then I wait for them, and they usually say, oh, no, I mean the COVID-19 vaccine. It's like, oh, okay, like, yeah, I'm pro-vaccine. Like, that's great. Like, I'm very happy I have the polio vaccine and everything. But as of right now, right, for males under the age of 30, less than 1,900 of me have, died in the United States from COVID-19. There are a lot of things in the United States that kill more than 2,000 males per year at my age, including walking across the street and getting hit by a car. So when I weigh the risk-benefit analysis, like, okay, I don't want to take the COVID-19 vaccine, right? Like, it's about my risk of getting some sort of adverse effect is slightly less, maybe about the same as me dying from COVID-19, if I got it. So I'm not an anti-vaxxer, and that's such a weird thing how they, like, twist that. So they say, hey, like, you're anti-vaxxer, you're anti-science. It's like, no, we're not. But you're right. I don't want to be in your team, but also I want to, live on my private property. And what you're trying to tell me is that by team, you mean that you can enforce your will upon me at my workplace and my property and my, wherever I go. And I wouldn't have a problem if businesses decided that, like, hey, like, we only want vaccinated people in here, as long as you can have businesses down the street that say we want to have unvaccinated people in here. Because then the market can actually sort it out, and we can actually see, with the collective intelligence of everyone, the cost-benefit analysis of this, and actually get to a solution that works for the most people. And that what's kind of cool about the market is it also addresses people at the margins, right? Like, will be solutions for people that don't necessarily fit into one or the other camp.
Well, think about how much more beneficial the system would have been to the people on the fringes who, let's say they're more at risk and, like, say they can't take a vaccine, or they're more at risk and there was no vaccine, let's say. Think about how much more Uber Eats, delivery services, grocery shopping delivery, all those services that were pretty overloaded at the start of the pandemic. Think about how much better things would have been if there wasn't a panic at the grocery stores. There wasn't overwhelming rushes and mad grabs for all these things by people who were perfectly safe and not at risk. Because those services existed, and if they didn't exist in an area, when a need arises, then they will crop up, even if it is just for the margins. Because if you're specializing, or if you can afford to take that on, then guess what? That's a whole demographic of people that you now get to serve that no one else is serving, right? So there are incentives to help people at the margins. What's funny about this, when you're talking about the whole anti-vaxxer, slandering and labeling. So I was going to say, between you and I, we have the interesting, because I have been vaccinated for COVID-19, and it was a pure convenience move for me. You haven't, but you have other vaccines, and it's like, you literally have people up and down the entire, like all the way from, no, I don't like any vaccines, to I don't like this one vaccine, but I take other vaccines, to I don't even mind this vaccine, I just haven't gotten it yet, and I don't mind other vaccines, to I'll take this vaccine, I don't care if you do or don't, I like other vaccines, and I like the vaccine, I think everyone should have the vaccine, but I don't. All these people can agree that mandates are bad. And none of them, except for the one at the very fringe that doesn't like any kind of vaccine, that's an anti-vaxxer. There's one of this huge swath that don't want vaccine mandates. But all they have to do is just call all of those groups, most of which support some form of vaccination, anti-vaxxers. And then you just bring you just bring all the baggage of the first group to everyone else.
I was having a conversation with a family member this week, and maybe you and I have talked about this before, but even if COVID-19 had a 100% fatality rate, you wouldn't need to mandate the vaccine for people to get vaccinated, right? Because everyone would see, oh crap, you get this, you die. You would have a big demand problem, right? And supply, because there wouldn't be enough to cover everyone at first, and because everyone would get it. You would probably literally have 100% adoption rate for everyone that could get the vaccine would get it at that point. And that's kind of like what you were talking about. Like, the market balances those things, right? And that's the collective intelligence of everyone and their incentives, and that's what matters. And as counterintuitive as it might seem, those market forces make sure that the people at the margins are taken care of. It's actually the only way that you can guarantee people at the margins are taken care of. People wonder, well, why are like gluten-free or dairy-free products at grocery stores so much more expensive? Well, it's like, if they weren't more expensive, you wouldn't actually even have the product, right? Because there would be no incentive to make them. It takes different ingredients and all these different things. And that's the ironic thing about this lady's tweet, right? Is that is an actual team mindset, right? Is that like, hey, like, we're going to pool our resources in the best way possible to make sure that, as many people can get the needs that they have, that they can. And we don't have to enforce it. It's by pure like incentives and inspiration and people's free choice. And that's the team I want to be part of. I don't want to be part of the team that says, hey, we're going to try and give you a bunch of carrots, and if you don't do that, we're going to give you the stick.
Reminiscent of the recent Sarah Silverman podcast, where she came to that realization of like, why don't we just like divorce as a country? If we're not on the same team, so let's separate.
That was crazy, dude. Like,
yeah.
I wonder if she thought it, like literally thought of that herself, or if she'd heard it from somewhere and it kind of entered. Because I was really surprised by that. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's a good thought, and like, I would much rather that be the sort of reaction and thought and trail that people are going down than we have to conform everyone to my will and to my way of living. Yep. Otherwise, you're not on the team.
We were founded as a democracy based on majority rule, though, Donnie. So,
True.
All right, we're going to move on to our last cringe of the day, and this is kind of a first for us. We're going to actually play a video, so bear with us as we do this. I'm going to read the tweet preface, and then we'll play the video. So this is from a page called Politics Girl. Ugh. She writes, for 8 months we tried the carrot, now we're on to the stick. Quite frankly, most of us are good and ready for the change. #vaccine mandate. So I'm going to play this video now.
So President Biden has announced sweeping coronavirus mandates around the country. America is trying to get to the next phase of this pandemic, the moving past it phase. The problem is, altogether too many people don't seem to want that. Many of us, myself included, mistakenly thought everyone would be on the same page about getting the virus under control. We just assumed that being locked down and wearing masks and dying alone would be something that people would enthusiastically want to put behind us. But because certain leaders and celebrities and television personalities have realized how much power and profit there is in continuing controversy, they have literally convinced people to take their chances with dying unnecessarily and call it freedom. So federal leadership had to adjust. They tried the carrot. For 8 months, they had readily accessible, safe, and reliable vaccines free of cost to every person in this country. We've incentivized, offered money, time off from work, bonuses, and prizes to take the vaccine. There are now 180 million fully vaccinated Americans in this country. 5.85 billion doses of the vaccine have been administered around the world. So for the people doing their own research and waiting on the data, that's a pretty huge test group that's doing just fine. But we're still averaging about about 1,500 deaths a day, and that clearly has to stop. So the government has moved past carrot onto stick, and most of us are good and ready for that change. To be clear, no one is forcing anyone to get the vaccine. However, if you don't take it, you might not be able to keep your job. And that might feel like a punishment to you, but it's really a benefit for the rest of society. Because one of the bonuses of living in a modern Western society like America is that we have safe workplaces. There is an entire federal department called OSHA dedicated to keeping your job site safe. So whether you need proper equipment to handle chemicals, a hard hat on a construction site, or you have to wear rubber-soled shoes when working with electricity, that is OSHA looking out for our collective health. It's why you can't work in a factory without proper ventilation. We have multiple fire exits, and you can't just put a ladder on top of a ladder. It has nothing to do with freedom and everything to do with making sure you don't get hurt at work. And now, during a pandemic, that same department is there to make sure you aren't exposed to a potentially deadly virus while on the job. Now, you can be as furious as you want, but no one is forcing you to get the vaccine. Just like no one is forcing you to put on a hazmat suit or protective gloves or a face shield when you weld. You make the choice to do what's required to keep yourself and others safe while at work. If you can't do that, then that's not the job for you. Freedom doesn't mean doing whatever you want whenever you want. That's chaos. So, get the shot or get a new job. Because vaccinated America is done trying to convince you to do the right thing. Now you comply so we don't die. The end. Moving on.
Oh my gosh. For one thing, she didn't define what freedom is. She just said, freedom isn't doing what you want whenever you want. Then what is it to you then? I mean, come on.
There were like so many bad takes in there. It's hard to think about where to begin.
I was trying to remember them, and I feel like I've forgotten half of them in the time that because she just kept coming out with hit after hit. I mean,
the one that's fun. Okay, one that hit me midway through was in the beginning. She goes, "I mistakenly thought that given our pandemic and everyone dying, that everyone would want to get this vaccine." And then she's like, well, we offered money and we offered free food and the vaccine's free. It's not, but it's free and blah, 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 blah. Right. It's like, okay, all these things you're saying are true, and yet 80 million people don't want to get it or don't think it's important enough. Don't you think that maybe that you're kind of blowing this out of proportion? Don't you think that majority of Americans are probably like, yeah, it's not worth it for me to do this? Like, I don't know, turn around and look at yourself and see, maybe you're the one that's kind of delusional here.
No. You're wrong there, Britt. Obviously, she's not the problem. It's the Principal Skinner from The Simpsons meme. Like, am I out of touch? No, it's those kids who are wrong. It's the, it's because she blames it. She's saying that. Sorry, this is just. I remember the take, and it's just so funny. She's saying that celebrities and politicians have figured out that there is like. I think she says power and profit to be made off of like being anti-vaxxer
generating controversy.
Generating controversy. Do you think that there is maybe power and profit to be had by mandating every American get a vaccine by pharmaceutical companies? Do you think there is maybe some profit in there? Do you think there is an incentive for a pharmaceutical company to want their vaccine to literally be mandated for every working American? Just a question.
I saw this. I'll have to send it to you so you can put it in the video. But I saw this hilarious meme the other day, and it had Don Draper from Mad Men. Have you seen that show?
Yeah. I've not fully, but I've seen it. Yeah.
And he's got a Pfizer logo. He's giving a pitch like for like how to advertise. He's got the Pfizer logo. He's like, and here's what we do. We force them to take it. And it's like brilliant marketing stream,
Well, that makes me think, it's been so many years now. I think it was like a Jimmy Fallon bit, which was surprising to me because he's not like the bastion of, lampooning the left or anything. But it was like right after the Obamacare mandates had gone through and the administration was touting their numbers about adoption. And he's like, and he starts out by like citing the number, like X number of Americans now have insurance because that, and the audience applauses. And he's like, it really is truly amazing what you can do when you make it illegal to not have something and then see everyone get that thing, just like a Cinderella story. And I thought it was so funny because it was like just making fun of the whole, like it's mandatory, compulsory, and then they're celebrating the numbers for it. So that's what this feels like. But anyway, like the idea that there's more profit to be had in generating controversy than there is profit to be had by mandating every American take your vaccine. Wild. I mean, what happened to the left's skepticism of big pharma? Where the flip did that go? It's just gone overnight. And yeah, so that was probably the take that made me laugh the hardest. And then of course the cringe. No one is forcing you. Again, we talked about this. It might have even been on the last episode.
Yes.
Just like it's not a true choice when you're taking those away, especially when you are putting that choice in on something that is not effective. It's like it'd be like if like a hazmat suit if you were required to wear a hazmat suit in an office job so that you didn't get pneumonia, right? Like the chances of that are already so low, and there might be some cases where yes, that's feasible that you could get pneumonia from working an office job, but that's just not generally going to be the case. And similarly, it's like if you wore a hazmat suit that could also still get you pneumonia, because it's not like vaccinated people are even not reporting it. I think the vaccine probably makes you less likely to get coronavirus or have worse or have not as bad symptoms. I think that's probably true, but it's still not it doesn't make you immune. It doesn't make you completely invulnerable to it either. That's what she says in the beginning. I thought everyone would want to get rid of the virus or want to move past it, that we'd be done with it. It's like, that's not how viruses work though.
We do want to be done with it. Like, and we should be done with it. Like, it's over.
Yeah.
Going back to her thing about, well, all these politicians and celebrities want to generate, controversy and everything and get power through that. And it's like, and then she cites the 1,500 deaths or 1,200 deaths or whatever it was per day number. And it's like, man, like, yeah, those numbers, like, in a vacuum are really scary, right? Like, it's like, no one wants 1,000 people to die a day. But guess what? A lot of people die for a variety of reasons every single day. And one of the things that, I was so shocking to me was that, like, every year people from medical malpractice or misprescribed drugs, about 480,000 people die from medical error and malpractice and misprescribed drugs from medical professionals, right? So it's like, okay, you have, taking her line of logic, you shouldn't go to the doctor, right? Based on this, like, if you work anywhere, like, you shouldn't go to the doctor because you might die. And it's like, that's kind of like, I like those type of stats because it really shows like how this has been blown out of proportion. Whether you like him or hate him or somewhere in between, Ben Shapiro had a great point a couple months back when I think the coronavirus total death count for the United States, I think, dropped to about 300 per day. And people were still making that a huge deal. And his point was like, dude, like 350 people die from Alzheimer's every day in the U.S., right? And no one is, freaking out about that. And you're right. Like, we should all, like, any sort of loss of human life is tragic, but you have to weigh when it comes down to it, you have to weigh, like, what does that mean in the scope of things, right? Because death is part of living, right? It's the end of living. And it's just hilarious. It's like they use these, I hate celebrities and influencers generating controversy just so they get more power and money. And here she is trying to grow her political page by, spreading fear and controversy.
Here's something that I'm just kind of thinking through in the moment. So maybe it's a half-baked idea. Maybe I'm spewing nonsense like normal or something. But when she brings up the point that no one is forcing you because, you're going in like OSHA, like these other OSHA regulations, you have to agree to do the things that will keep others safe at your job, right? The problem is that the claim that's being made about is on the policy that any company that has over 100 employees, unless you're specifically exempted, like postal workers, for some mysterious reason that the government workers that are handing physical items door to door, I don't know why they're exempted. It doesn't make any sense, of course, but regardless, other than those few exceptions, businesses pretty indiscriminately have to have their employees either vaccinated or take vaccine or take tests or whatever. But the problem is that, again, since it's an indiscriminate blanket policy on every single kind of business, my guess is that her claim is that in order to, quote unquote, do your job to keep others safe, it doesn't matter what the job is if you are working a job, you have to keep others safe via the vaccine or whatever, because that's the choice that you're making, right? That's kind of what she equates it to, is like, you have to make the choice to keep others safe. But since it's an indiscriminate on any business, she's not able to make any specific claims on why whatever business this is required on has a unique probability to spread coronavirus, or why it has a unique interfacing with the public or whatever. So her claim really shouldn't be limited just to working, because at the end of the day, a grocery store worker doing their job who's required to be vaccinated to keep others safe is putting people at risk just as much as the grocery customer is, also in that store, also going around. And the grocery customer, of course, is not working a job to go shopping. They're just living normal. So by this own person's logic of it's not really a choice, you're just doing the thing that keeps people safe, is no. That logic also has to apply to every single human in America who goes into public at all, because you can't make a proper distinction between working a job and living in society, because this mandate is to all businesses. Now, if this were a mandate for all restaurant workers, you could make the claim that because they're handling food that's going out to people, that's the claim. If it was to all airline workers, it's because you're in a contaminated or a tight space or something. But this is to every single business, and her claim is that OSHA is protecting people who are working to keep others safe. But because there is no distinguishable difference between interacting in society and working all jobs in America over 100 employees, her claim does go into the realm of not a choice if this is her moral burden, right? Do you see what I'm saying here?
Yeah.
Am I making sense, or am I sort of the ravings of a mad lunatic?
Yeah. Are you going to be a future cringe post topic?
Yeah. Right.
Now that
right.
we've got video. No,
Yeah.
you're totally making sense. One correction I would like to say, just so we're above board. I guess the federal mandate for vaccines doesn't apply to the Postal Service, but I guess the OSHA rules do apply.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Okay.
That's just what I read, because I heard that somewhere and I wanted to double check it. Who knows what that means, but
yeah.
regardless.
Well, at one point they were exempted, which was weird and bizarre. But
for the federal mandates, they were exempted, yes.
Which makes very little sense. But regardless, I mean, it's just like her whole thing is like she's trying to play the quote unquote good guy when she's like, we're not forcing you to. You have a choice. But her logic would dictate that it would still apply to people who are just interacting in society, at which point those people don't have a choice, because they're not taking a job to live. They're just living. They're just being human.
Yep. And that's kind of the classic thing with the left, right? Like they don't have really good distinctions about work and life. Like it's kind of like, yeah, they don't see the economy is us, right? So when they in the very beginning were advocating for shutting down lockdowns, like what does it matter? Like everything's going to get shut down. People go home. Like it proves that we can all go home and not work. It's like, right. Like look at now all the prices, look at all the shortages on everything. Like the economy is us. It is literally every job is essential, because if someone's working it to provide for themselves, it is essential for them to live. It'd be like, no one would think that if she said, hey, take this vaccine or go to jail. That's not a choice.
Right.
I mean, yeah, by definition, it's a choice. You get to choose one or the other, but it's not made in good spirit or in good faith. It's not like, yeah, you don't get to opt out of making that choice, right? And that's what they're doing here.
Maybe that's how she defines freedom, because she just said that freedom isn't doing whatever you want whenever you want, and then she doesn't define. She says that's chaos, and then she just doesn't define it. So maybe we could ask her if choosing between taking a vaccine or going to prison is that freedom? Is that a free choice that you get to make there? Because you'd probably make the contrived argument that it is, which is of course absurd and silly and insane.
It's the other side of it too is just like, what a snobbish and elitist thing to be like, we tried the carrot, now you're gonna get the stick.
Yeah.
It's like lady, like you know what the most hesitant group of people by education level to get the vaccine is? It's PhDs, people with like some level of doctorate education. And yet these people feel like it's their job to like lecture and be the guardians of how we live our lives and to keep us safe. And I see a pull-up bar in her video in the background in the doorway. A lot of people get injured during that. Like we had someone walk through a house one time that we were trying to sell, and we had a pull-up bar, and like, hey, like this is actually could be a problem for like insurance, right? Because a lot of people injure themselves on these doorway pull-up bars. So it's like, hey, lady, if I want to keep you safe, like maybe you should take that down, right? It's like,
Yeah.
it's like think about like your life and worry about yourself. It's your right to have that, up there. So how is it not someone else's right to choose what they do with their body? And it's just crazy. Like these people, the elitist and snobbish, and they just it's crazy how much you can see that they're just projecting right onto other people their own problems. And yeah.
Yeah, well, it is very emblematic of the. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head. I'm about halfway through listening to this episode of the Jordan Peterson podcast where he's talking about the how the wealthy and the elites of society are often espousing one idea and promoting one set of values, but they actively choose a different one. So in the example he gives being with like promoting polyamory and the idea of multiple partners and stuff like that. But then you ask them, what their plans are, and it's like, oh, I plan on settling down and with a single husband or a single wife or whatever, or they'll talk about how marriage is an institution of the patriarchy, and yet all of the elites and well-to-do people, if they have the choice, choose to get married overwhelmingly. So in the same way, it's just kind of interesting how they dictate these things about how we tried the care, now we need the stick, or we believe in lockdowns, and then they go out into a party or whatever it is. There's all the things they espouse, and then the things that they actually do. So maybe it's the top-down elite saying we all need to get the vaccine, and then they're very hesitant themselves about actually getting the vaccine. It makes me think, and I don't know if he which way he did, but was it Chris Rock who just got COVID? I think he did. Maybe it was Chris Rock, and
yes,
he tweeted tweeted the like, this thing sucks, get vaccinated. And before he'd said he'd been vaccinated, and in that case, it's funny. It's a funny reality because you're left with two options. One, he is vaccinated, but his tweet about getting coronavirus says get vaccinated, as if that's going to prevent it. But if, like he said before, he was vaccinated, then why would you tell people to get vaccinated
other than
to
prevent the suffering you're feeling right now?
Yeah, right. It's like, it's such a weird thing to say. Like, I put on, it's like I put on a helmet and then I took a brick to the head and I have a concussion and I'm like, wear a helmet. It's like, yeah, on the one hand, you can say that like the helmet saved your life, I guess, but with the coronavirus, you don't really know you can't just say that it would have been worse without it necessarily. But also the way that you tweet it is very misleading to say that like you weren't. It'd be like someone wearing a helmet or not saying I'm wearing a helmet, I'm wearing a helmet. Yeah. And then you get a concussion, ow, wear a helmet, not including that he was wearing a helmet when he got the concussion. And then, so that's the one scenario. Or the other scenario is that he said he was vaccinated before and didn't, and now he's like, oh man, I should have gotten vaccinated, do it now. But he was lying then. But the point is that there's all this hypocrisy within the elites, and they try to frame it a certain way.
Right? Like that's the most obvious
one. Exactly. Or even earlier on, Newsom going to dinner right after he'd instituted the lockdowns and saying no informal gatherings with people anywhere.
My favorite one from the pandemic is Lori Lightfoot from Chicago, because they banned being able to go get a haircut, right? Like go to any salons or anything like that. And then she got caught. She got caught going to get a haircut. And on a press conference, because she had to address it, she said, I consider myself a neat person. Like, I need to have my hygiene and to look good. I'm going to be on the cameras and stuff. It's like, holy cow, lady. Like, you literally are saying that, like, other people don't care about how they look. And because you care about how you look, you're going to break your own rules. It's like, rules for thee, but not for me.
Yep. Wild stuff, man.
All right. I'm good on this one if you are.
Yeah, I think in order to get more out of it, we just have to rewatch it, but I don't know if I can take another 2 minutes for that.
Awesome. Well, friends, thanks for hanging out with us today. You can catch us on Cringe Post Pod. That's our username for all of our socials, or at cringepost.com. If we said anything that made you cringe, be sure to let us know in our DMs or on our website. And we'll catch you next time. Thanks.